Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I am back with another video. Today's video is featuring some products from the most recent Papertrey Ink release. This is the Beauty in Motion stamp and die set, and it is kind of like the star of the show today. I will also be using the corner doilies, the elegant doilies, and the sentiment set is called Tuck in Sentiments, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So this stamp set is obviously it's kind of like a very loose flower, and I thought that it would work beautifully with a watercolor technique. So what I'm doing here is I'm laying out my stamps to build a watercolor background. So I'm using both of the stamps in the set. You can use a lot of different watercolor mediums for this. I am going to be using my Karin Brushmarker Pros. I picked out some pretty bold colors that I thought would look nice together. And the reason that I chose these is because I can color them directly onto the stamp. So basically, it was just the easiest application. You can also do this with distress inks. You know, you would just ink up different portions of the stamp, spray it, stamp it, ink up another portion, spray it, stamp it, so on and so forth. But this worked really well for me, and they're really bold colors. You could also do this with the Zig Clean color markers or the Altenew watercolor markers. Any of those would work. I have seen other people use the distress, watercolored pencils to, like, you wet the pencil and then you color around the stamp. I've seen Jen Shirkus do that, so that might be an option too if you own those. But this worked really well. And you can see that the ink is pooling up because it's a water-based ink on a photopolymer stamp, but we're going to spritz it with water before we stamp it down. And this was the first one I did, so I used quite a bit of water. It was a little bit too much, and that's okay. Like, sometimes you just got to play around with the process, and then wherever you lift it up from, when you're using the MISTI or a stamp positioner tool, you don't really have a choice of where it lifts up from. So I let it dry back a little bit, and then the leftovers, I kind of stamped them down again to see if I could change where the lines picked up at. And it did change it just a little bit, but you could see in that smaller flower, I kind of had too much color going on, and so I got a little bit of brown. So I learned from this first stamping, I had a little bit too much water, and I had maybe a little bit too many colors. So now, going forward, I can adjust those things and get a better result. So it's all about the learning and the process of it and what works for you, what you like, what you don't like. And so from here on out, I pretty much stuck to just 3 colors on the smaller one, as well as maybe just, 4 colors on the larger one. There might have been times I used 5. It just depends on, because it's a much larger area, so I have a lot more real estate to work with. But I just am going to go through, I'm going to add the colors until I'm happy with them. And just always putting colors next to each other that I know will work well. So next to my purples, I always put either my pink or my blue. Next to my yellow, I usually put my orange. I wasn't trying to create any kind of green in this particular card. So I made sure not to put my yellow next to my blue. I probably would have been too mad about it, but it wasn't something that was a goal of mine, just because I wanted to keep the color schemes relatively the same. And so, again, now this time around, once I'm done coloring, you can see I've limited my color palette, and I am going to, when I spray with my water this time, I'm going to spray just the stamp 1 or 2 times and then stamp it down. And I was much happier with this result. It just held its shape a little bit better. It still had that beautiful watercolor look that I loved, but the stamp held its shape a lot nicer. So that was pretty much my recipe for success from here on out, was just 1 or 2 spritzes per stamp and then moving on to the next one. So I am stamping off of the edge. And that does mean that on my mat, sometimes I do get some of that watercolor pooling on my MISTI sticky mat. But I just kind of sapped it up with a paper towel or a baby wipe or whatever, just being careful not to touch my cardstock. And then just going to repeat the same procedure every time. I am varying the colors. Here I'm just checking how far I need to color to make sure the whole thing is covered, like that when I stamp it down I'm not leaving some empty areas. But I really, really enjoyed this. I knew from this background that I was going to be able to get 2 different cards just because for the game plan that I had in my mind. But stamping off the edge just helps make it look more like a print, like a pattern paper piece or like a fabric, so that it gives the appearance as if the design continues. So when I stamped this one down, I could see that little section right there didn't really get enough water. So I just spritzed it just a little bit and then stamped that part down, and I was happier with the way that filled in. And then I just, cleaned everything up, waited for it to dry completely before I went back in and stamped my centers. For my centers, I just chose to use black because I've got a lot of other color going on here and I wanted the centers to be seen. So I just stamped them down in black ink. But again, you do want to make sure you wait until this is dry before you go in and do any additional stamping. For this kind of half flower, I only inked up like the top portion of the center. This time around, when I stamp it again for the one that I actually die cut, I just stamped the whole thing. I thought maybe it would look strange, but it didn't. So I just committed to it. So now once those centers are stamped in, then this piece is done and we're going to move on to the next. The next piece is the ones that I'm going to be die cutting and using in their entirety, not just as a background, but as a focal point. So let's talk about life. What has happened? So I actually shared these cards on my Instagram on Monday, and then just did not get around to sharing the video, because it's been a week here. I told you guys before that Peanut is actually on vacation with his dad, so we didn't have him this week, but Eric was out of the office like his normal routine because he had training, so that added to a little bit of a different kind of schedule. And then Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, we discovered we had water in our basement. Now, if you guys have been following my channel for a long time, you may remember that we had a business refinishing furniture, which meant that there is a lot of furniture in our basement. In addition to all the other things that you would normally store. Like we have our gift wrapping down there. We have things that we save from our wedding down there. Like there's a lot of things in our basement. Now our basement is waterproofed, and we have a sub pump. So how did this water end up in our basement? Well, we're pretty sure that our sub pump went to go be with Jesus. Honestly, we're pretty sure that is what is occurred, because we've been having a lot of heavy rains. Obviously, it's spring, and so Sunday morning, Eric went down to the basement for something. There was no water. We had rain on Sunday and Monday. Here, I'm going to go back in. You could see those lines from where the water were pulled up from the stamp. And I'm just going to blot up any of the lines that I don't like, that I felt like were too dark or maybe they were kind of muddy. And then so I blotted those up. You can totally do that. Watercolor is super forgiving. I let them dry, and then this is me going back in and doing the centers just like we did before. And then these will get die cut out with their coordinating dies, and I will also be doing the other die cutting that I will need to create my little trio of cards. So I will be cutting these out, and I should have said I'm working on Canson Monteval watercolor paper. That's my preferred watercolor paper, and that is what I am stamping on. If you try to do this technique on regular cardstock, I don't think that you will get the same result because it's not meant to resist the moisture of water. So now this is called My Mom. There's actually 3 dies in this set, and 2 of them are kind of like backgrounds. but I am going to stamp this right out of die cut this right out of the middle. Then that will give me the word mom in these, beautiful watercolors, and it will also give me the negative piece of the background. And so that is how I'm going to create all 3 of my cards. I super loved this print. Like, I just thought that it came out so pretty. I loved the bold colors. And obviously you can use whatever color palette speaks to you. But I love a bold, bright color. So here, this is the corner doilies, and they're meant to be cut apart. I left mine together because I wanted to use them as like a background focal point. I just want to be clear about this. So then I flipped it upside down. I knew that because they were super detailed dies and I was leaving them together, that they were not going to completely cut out the areas in all the areas. In fact, I was banking on it because I didn't want it to show through. I just wanted it to be a texture element in the background. So I was not looking for them to die cut all the way through. This one, this elegant doily, I was looking for it to cut all the way through, and it did. I didn't have any issues. I did run it through twice, but then I just went in, popped everything out, and it die cut beautifully. So I just wanted to explain why the other one is not, like, you can see all the pieces parts. You can see all the pieces parts because that was the intention. So here, this little tuck sentiments is a great kind of go-to sentiment set. It's got, happy birthday, good luck, congratulations, thank you, all of those things, which I'm a big proponent of those because you can use them for really any kind of card that you want to make. So here, this is nautical cardstock from Hero Arts. I treat it with my anti-static tool. I am stamping down in Versamark, and then I am going to heat set these in white detail embossing powder. Why couldn't I think of that word? And then I'll trim them out into little labels. This sentiment set does have dies that come with it for like the little decorative edges that are included in the stamp set, but I did not end up using them. I just used the sub-sentiments as they were without any extra floof. So then we're going to work on putting our cards together. Here, I am using the negative, just kind of taping it over my background, so that I can get the mom adhered inside there straight and spaced appropriately. Now, you guys know I don't love the foam tape, like the finicky bits. I don't love it. But I felt like it was necessary because this card was a little bit more simple. It needed something to kind of like bring it up a notch. So I did end up putting foam tape on the back of all of these letters, much to my frustration. You know how I roll. It's worth it. That is why I do it, but I don't love that part of the process. And that's okay. We don't have to love all parts of the process. If we're happy with the end result, sometimes a little bit of struggle is worth it. So anyway, we think the sub pump totally just died, because we have not heard it running. So we went downstairs, I'm sorry. We had heavy rains Sunday, Monday. Tuesday was a nice day. Then Wednesday is when Eric went back into the basement again and found the standing water. And it was all through, our basement is unfinished, but it was all throughout the basement. What we have since determined is that it probably ran along the cracks. And the walls are dry. So, that's not the problem. It's got to be coming up from the ground where the sub pump is not pulling it from because it's not working. So last night we went in and just ruthlessly cleaned out here. Now, remember I told you I knew it wouldn't cut all the way through, but there's still dies. There's still sections that absolutely did cut all the way through, and they're being held in place by the pressure of the pieces next to them. Once I started adding the glue, they started kind of wiggling around because I added a little bit of moisture to them. So I did go in with just some pixie tape and tape around the edges to make sure none of my pieces parts were going to move any further. And then I went back in, added my glue, adhered it down to my card base. So that's what is happening here. And then that's really all I did for the entirety of the card. Like this one's pretty simple. I mean, of course, I went back and added some gemstones, but that's that. And then so for the next one, this is the negative. I am going to pop up this one. The navy in the background will show through, so you'll be able to read that, Mom, and then the sub-sentiment. Again, because this print is super beautiful, that watercolor technique worked great. Like, that's really the star of the show, and there's no reason to cover it up. So I just left it super simple. But anyway, so yeah, we've just been ruthlessly cleaning out the basement. We do have somebody coming to look. I called some locally, try to use local businesses, and they just didn't have anybody available until Monday. And it's supposed to rain all weekend. Like, we cannot just leave it until Monday. So I ended up calling Roto-Rooter, and as my husband told me, we are going to pay for that service. But as long as they can help us, then it is what it is. But they actually had a technician that could come out this evening. So they should be here, and then hopefully we'll at least have an answer for what our next steps are. But yeah, just been pitching stuff, sucking up water. Thankfully it's clear water. It's not super dirty, nasty, disgusting water. It's clear. So yeah. And then I'm going out of town this weekend for Sunday and Monday. I'm leaving on Saturday. That's a whole other thing. I'll play catch up with you on that on another video. So here, love this doily. I just cut it from one side and then flipped it over to the other. It's going to be the background for these beautiful flowers. So if you have any images like this, where you're they're solid images where you can color on top of them and add watercolor to them. It doesn't necessarily have to be even as something as loose or as flowy as this one is. Though Papertrey Ink has good sales pretty often. And in fact, this one I think right now is $14.40. But anyway, I would recommend that you try it. Pull out some solid stamps that you know and love, and give it a try, because the results, the effort that goes into it is super minimal, and the results are stunning. So here, this one I decided to turn into a happy birthday card. So I just, popped up my flowers, popped up the little sentiment on there, and then I'll go back in and add my gems. I did use loose gems, and these are I can't remember the name of them. They're from Crafty Meraki. Sparkle Rainbow Sparkle. They're very pretty, and because they're loose, you get quite a bit for not as many dollars. But then Honeybee also, if you are I'm not messing around with free rhinestones, that's totally fine. Honeybee has a very, very similar one that is a sticker. So it already has the adhesive on it, and I love those too. So just went through, added my little rhinestones to the cards. Normally I would add some clear shimmer out of the pen, but because I loved the way the watercolor looked so much, I didn't want to risk messing it up by adding more moisture. So I decided to just leave that off. So here is all 3 cards in their entirety. Yeah, just super cute. The whole PTI release was adorable. I will link it below so you can go check it out. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you're inspired to do a little bit of easy watercoloring, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.